Hello, homeschoolers. I'm Steph from the Canadian Schoolhouse. And this week we are here with Lively and Stephen from Junior Think Tank Academy. And they are going to share about critical thinking. And I'm just going to share actually just a little wee personal note. Critical thinking, I never even heard that term before, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And maybe I've heard it in different terms, but as far as like teaching my kids critical thinking skills, it's like I didn't even really know what that was. So this is actually a real treat for me to be able to talk to two people that not only kind of have a really good understanding of that, but also have created and developed programs just to really do that, to instill those great skills in our kids. So I want to welcome you, Lively and Stephen, to our video today, to our live stream. And thank you so much for joining us today. And I want you first to share. I'd like you first to share about yourselves as homeschoolers, because you are homeschooling parents, so you can share a little bit about that, and then also share what you do for homeschoolers with Junior Think Tank Academy.
Okay. Well, my name is Lively, and I'm actually a teacher. With homeschooling, we talked about homeschooling before we got married, when I actually went to go visit his brother's family for the first time, and found out that his brother homeschools his own kids.
Well, his wife does.
His wife does. And so it had been in my mind after teaching in the public school system that maybe when I have kids, I would like to homeschool. So we had that conversation before we got married, and we ended up homeschooling our kids. Our boys are now next year, they'll be going into grade 8 and 9. And the plan was only to teach them till grade 2. But because my understanding of boys in particular, especially with the scientific theories that I learned in my education degree, that boys really flourish when they have small group or one-on-one instruction. So the plan was to do that until they were in grade 2, but we've continued on. And we were actually fully aligned. So we followed all of the provincial guidelines and all the government outcomes that the government wanted us to achieve initially. And our homeschool board was great, but the only thing that was lacking was the activities. So I ended up starting my own homeschool co-op. Actually, Stephen encouraged me to do so. And I started an organization where I went out in the community and I organized a whole bunch of activities: museum trips, science classes, STEM classes, overnight camping trips at historic sites and provincial parks. And I had about over 100 activities per school year that I was responsible for overseeing, and kind of offsetting what we were doing at home with some hands-on activities with experts out in the community. And so that's what I was doing.
And it was really cool for me because on my days off or on the weekends or whatnot, I got to take the kids and participate in these things. I would take time off to do the overnights and stuff. And I was amazed because I thought that Lively just did such a great job of where did this come from? I didn't know this was here, and like exploring the community and around our province. And I thought it was just the coolest thing. And it was so much fun for me taking the kids with the boys and going, wow, man, this is really cool. I think I'm probably having more fun than they are because I'm just as interested in them. And then some weeks where we would have lots of activities and sort of the school work would kind of get pushed off to the weekends. Then I would be the teacher, and I was like, okay, you got to do math or social studies or whatever. And and that was my first taste of homeschooling and homeschool teaching. And then of course I would get the old, Dad, that's not how Mom does it. No, you're doing it wrong. This is how we do it. Like, okay. but that was my first, well, kind of my first little bit of taste. And then as the boys got a little bit older, I'd be coming home from work and Lively and the boys would be like, yeah, we couldn't get through our math. We need help. So I'd be doing the math in the evenings with the kids because it was getting a little more complicated and stuff. And then last year when we started up Junior Think Tank Academy, I took some time off work so that Lively could work full time on it. And I took over the homeschooling duties. So every day I was there, I was going through the program and teaching them this and getting them to do that. And I became the teacher, and I loved it. It was fun, and I had a ball with the kids. And
there's too much laughter.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh, no, I'm.
But it's different when Dad was homeschooling.
It
was, and I think that the boys in their growth, becoming preteens and 10, 11, and 12.
Big difference.
I think they're
more mature.
They're more mature, yeah. But I think they were getting sick of Mom's style, and they were clashing, and I think they needed a break and the change of scenery and have Dad teaching, and I enjoyed it. I think the kids really benefited from it.
I think it was just having that male presence, because I see in this past year with Stephen overseeing their homeschooling, he would just say, you need to do this, and the boys would do it. There was no negotiation. With me, there's a lot of negotiation. If you complete your science, then you can have your fun time. There's a lot of negotiation. Dad just goes in there and says, this is what we're doing, and that's what they do.
Well, I know that's how it seems. Boy, there's a little bit of work in the background to get us to that point, but yeah.
That's neat to hear you two in that different homeschooling styles, but it's so much different even just to think about different homeschooling families, right? We all homeschool a little bit differently because whether it's the mom or the dad, right? You would see that. Yes. I certainly don't have that in my household. Maybe one day, but my husband it would be great on teaching some things for sure. But not that he's around much, but if he was the one teaching, it would be very different, and not better or worse, just completely different, which is
different.
You're right. It is, you're right.
Just
exactly
what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when did Junior Think Tank? So you mentioned that about a year ago. You started that.
Yeah. So that came about because Stephen came to me and said last spring.
Yeah.
He said, so do you want to go into business? I'm like, are you crazy? We're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
But he had this idea. So
one of the activities that Lively had organized and was actually teaching herself for the homeschool co-op for our boys was social studies. So she put together this program. We called it the Canada Club, and you taught the Canada Club for the boys in your homeschool. And why did you teach that?
For a lot of reasons. I wasn't really happy with the curriculum that was being provided to us because, like I said before, we were fully aligned. And so we were getting everything that the government was, all of the worksheets and textbooks and stuff that the government was providing. But I found it to be very dry. So what I did was I took all of my social studies material that I use teaching, and I created a club, and I made it project-based. So I would still have my talk. So I'd stand in front of the classroom, and I'd have my PowerPoint presentation. But we had different projects, and the parents that we were with were wonderful. I mean, we organized the kids making 3D maps. We held a mock election in a public space where we had the general public coming in and casting votes. We had student presentations. So for every single session that we ran Canada Club, the kids would use some kind of technology to do a presentation, stand up in front of class, talk, and then answer questions. So, and the one thing I also did was we did historical timelines, kind of along the lines of other curriculum, so that the students could sequence events. And but as Stephen came up with this business idea, I knew that Canada Club might not be the way to go. I had thought, well, maybe we could do like Zoom meetings or something, and I'd teach on Zoom. But as the pandemic went on, and then hearing feedback from kids who were on Zoom classes, I'm like, okay, this is not it. But I also knew the in-person kind of teaching style was not what I was hoping for.
Right. So yeah, Crazy Me's was like, because we knew the Canada Club was running its course, I guess was the best way to put it. But we were thinking about putting the timelines together and selling it as like a book or a module or something like that. And I said, well, these classes are terrific. Why don't we put it on online? But it has to be different from the Zoom. So we had to put it in a form that was digital, because our boys they're totally computer savvy. They're picking up their phones and they're texting, and they got their iPads and they got their computers and
they're picking up our phones.
Yeah,
they don't have phones.
Yeah,
they pick up our phones and they send text.
Yeah, so our kids are totally digitally savvy, and you kind of presume that most kids these days, if they're not digitally savvy, they should be digitally savvy. So it's one thing that we wanted to make sure that we had a digital platform that we could present the courses on.
Yeah, so that's where I started researching. We were both researching. And I found this scientist in Britain who was doing, he was setting up schools of the future and what it would look like. So this was his scientific experiment, experiential learning. And the school of the future would be self-paced student learning that's centered around the computer. And so they were finding that students could pretty much at an older age, so this was high school, maybe they ran this program too in India, but so older kids, junior high school. And they said that this type of schooling can happen, but you need to use this thing called LMS. And I didn't know what LMS was. So I asked Stephen, do you know what this LMS system is? And
yeah, sure, of course. So a learning management system is a platform that typically corporations use when they're putting together their corporate training, their onboarding, their occupational health and safety, so that employees can come in and then they click on their training and the courses are presented, and it manages, it tracks users and all that kind of stuff. So so I knew what that was, and so we picked it, and we knew that that's the way we were gonna go. And
actually, I told you that if with this LMS, the one thing that I wanted was something that the kids could actually touchscreen,
interactive,
some kind of touchscreen technology that the kids could manipulate things on the screen, or at the very least take a mouse and,
point and click and
actually do. The touchscreen was what I was looking at. There's not many LMS systems that are out there that don't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay,
we're kind of in the mid-range.
This is the one technology. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. That's how Junior Think Tank.
Yeah. So I manage the platform, and Lively manages putting together the program and the lessons, and our kids are the guinea pigs. And but there's also in creating the program. So we went from, let's take our little historical timelines things or a Canada Club PowerPoints to put them on, and we went, okay, this isn't good enough, because there's books and worksheets and things like that out there, but the important thing for us was that the things that we felt that were lacking in the Alberta curriculum and in the curricular outcomes that weren't being taught with our kids, we wanted to address those things. they're in the curriculum, and then the curricular outcomes, but they weren't being taught. So this little program that we had going grew to, it's like, how do we address this stuff?
Mhm.
So you two have several modules, and I think so. The first time when we talked before, I figured that out. It's like, I know I've seen Junior Think Tank before, because I got those 2 free lessons. So for everybody watching, go and check out Junior Think Tank, and you get 2 lessons to see what it's like, because as we kind of started off with this, and Lively and Stephen talking about their homeschooling, their children, right? We all homeschool a little bit differently, so it's excellent to be able to see what that program is, and if it works great for your kids. And it is really, I remember my first thought of it is, oh, this is really different than what I've seen a lot, even just for that, because there is lots of different learning management systems too that are incorporated in different ways of online learning. Lots of great programs for homeschoolers that you can get online, but it was so nice to see something that's a little bit unique. And I think one of the things I liked about the most, Lively, is just your voice on it. I remember your voice, that it just sounded so calming. For one thing, you have a wonderful voice, but just the way that you were explaining the concepts, and now I'm not going to be able to really, I don't even remember what it was the lessons were on now, but I really enjoyed that little taste of it, and enjoyed being able to see a little bit about what that is. So one of the things, so really what you have is a social studies, right? But intertwined in that is history and geography. So tell us what the difference is between a social studies curriculum and say a history curriculum, and what's the same, what's different?
Yeah, well, history is, and there's lots of really great history programs out there, and that's what we were finding. History is events and dates and places and historical figures and that type of thing. And like I said, there's lots of really great programs. The Story of the World is one that our kids use. History Alive is another one. It's good, but it's history, and it doesn't teach social studies. And social is interacting with your community around you, right? Being social, how to interact. So the thing that was missing, and that's the social aspect for us, was that, well, we're not teaching our kids what it means to be a citizen in your community and how to interact with the people in your inside and outside of your community. When your kid is growing up, their concept of community expands as they grow older. When you're a child, your community is your parents and your immediate siblings, right? And when you get a little older and a little more aware, it's your extended family. And when you get to school age, now your community is your school, and then your community is your neighborhood. And then when you get a little bit older, your community is your city, and that type of thing, right? But history doesn't teach you what it means to be a member of your community and a citizen in your city or your country. And it doesn't tell you about different cultures around you and what different cultural norms that are outside of your community and your culture are. And it doesn't teach you that. So what we wanted to do is one thing was kind of show why social studies, like why do we need to learn social studies? And I know from my kids and from other kids I've interacted with, how many times have you heard, especially with math, why am I learning this? I'm never going to use this, right? And it was really hard for kids or parents, even teachers, to answer the question, why am I learning social studies? What am I using this for?
So what I did when I was starting to develop the program was I took all the government documents, all the government frameworks, and I started to figure out, okay, what is this social studies business? And I had all of the content, so all the historical people, the people, places, and things that they needed to learn. And then I had a list of all of the skills and processes that the students should obtain by taking social studies. And so we had the content, but then the skills and processes weren't really there. The content in itself wasn't different from province to province. There might be, you know, one event that's taught in one province, or one group of people that's taught in the province, like the Gaels in the Atlantic provinces, and there's more focus on the railway in BC, and the Plains Indians here in Alberta. But I was looking at the skills and processes. I'm like, okay, they're supposed to learn how to be critical thinkers, but I don't see how they could be critical thinkers if they're just learning a list of facts and figures. So as I was developing the program, there was also in the provincial framework something like why social studies, the rationale behind social studies. And then I just kind of extrapolated and I said, well, what's the whole rationale of education? If it's not just social studies, why are you sitting in my classroom? I love to ask my students that on the first day of the class, like, why are you even here? Because then I could help them figure out what's their purpose in being here and listening to me. So as I was looking at that, I was looking at the education system and the history of the education system. And of course, they kind of touch on this in the regular government curriculum, that about the ancient Greeks, you know, Western civilizations built on the ancient Greeks. But I'm like, you know what? So is the school system.
Yeah.
The first schools that came out that weren't military-based, like military-based training, were schools of thought. Like, what are you thinking? You're spending your time at school and you're doing that. What's your job doing while you're there? Is to think. I'm like, okay, so here we have thinking, and you need to think critically. All right, I got what this whole program is supposed to be about. What are you doing while you're doing in social studies? You're learning how to think critically about the history of mankind. And you have to think critically. And what I was trying to do was set up a program where I'm teaching the history, but the end result was an understanding of where you came from and why you are the way you are, and how you interact with the world. And so at the end of our program, the big thing is that I have this worldview module. And we go through all of the history and we form your 4 parts of your worldview. And this is your worldview that's going to help you once you step outside the classroom. Because you're not going to exist in this vacuum for the rest of your life. You know, the foundation that you're supposed to have is supposed to continue on with you. And that's what I was hoping for, to give you that foundation. And yeah.
Yeah, Lively hates when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's Junior Think Tank Academy. It's not Junior Learn a Bunch of Facts and Figures and Pass a Test Academy.
I think the biggest the most difficult part of it is when we think about critical thinking, we're talking about information. And like, where are you getting your information? And the sources of information that are available to you. So when Stephen was talking about how your community continues to expand as you get older, but that community started with your family. And there was a movie a couple years ago, a couple decades ago, and they talk about the circle of trust. You have to be in the circle of trust. And that's what I kind of want to give the kids. Okay, I'm gonna have you figure out who is in your circle of trust. Because once you get out of my class, you can't be living on the shifting sand where you don't know who you're supposed to trust. And so I present them the information, and I do it 2 ways. And I kind of present it like they're in a court, because in the courtroom, you're dealing with facts. And we have one side who represents the plaintiff. That plaintiff has their set of experts, their set of scientists, and they're going to present, based on the evidence, the body of evidence that's provided, their side of the case. And then on the other side, you're going to have the defense. They're going to bring in their own set, a completely different set of experts, a completely different set of scientists. And they're going to present their side of the case. So we have two sides of the case based on facts. But there's only one truth, and that truth for you. And so that's what I want to show the kids. Like, there's one side, but there's a source of information that you can count on, and it's going to be there for you as you continue on, and whatever issue that you're dealt with. The truth is there, and you have to weed through those facts, so that's what you're going to be going through every time you're confronted with something in your life. You have this worldview, and that's how you sift through all this information, and you hear all these facts from both sides, and you gotta trust that circle of trust, and then you can move forward and make the best decision you can make at the time with the information that you have.
Yeah, and we think it's important that it's important to note that we teach people or kids how to think, not what to think. We teach them that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to challenge commonly accepted theories. It's okay to say, okay, that's nice, but I have some more information. I'd like to get some more information and ask questions and challenge that. And because you don't want to just have a child sitting there getting fed a bunch of stuff. You want a child to be able to receive that information and process that information, and ask questions or spit it back or learn more. Because one of the curricular outcomes of the framework is we want our kids to become lifelong learners, right? So you want kids to get this information, go, that's interesting. I want to learn more. We've got stuff, extracurricular stuff that on our program that if you choose to learn more, if you like this topic, here's some other resources you can go to, right? So it's important for us that that thinking and that individual thought and having your personality come out when you're answering questions, that's important to us, and we think that's important to the families.
And I find like each individual person, so even us as parents, as adults, and then as we're raising our kids, right, be able to discern. And even as I was reading the Bible this morning, and I'm thinking of course our talk today, and it just really, I mean, all throughout the Bible is really telling us the importance of wisdom, right? Not the importance of smarts, like not the importance of knowing all that, and nothing wrong with knowing the facts, and that's good. That's good, and it's got its place and everything as well too. But it's definitely one of those things where we need that wisdom, and I feel like I'm right there, and that critical thinking is really about developing wisdom, and that you're standing on the truth, and definitely standing on God's words. It is one of those ways on what the Bible is instilling in each of us, but also expanding our, and I think as you said it best, Stephen, right? Our kids, when they're young, they need a little bit of critical thinking, I guess, right? But they're really only around a certain amount of people, which is really mostly their parents and their family, right? Which they're getting that viewpoint and that perspective just from a few people. And then as that expands more and more, I believe we all, especially if we choose that role to homeschool, we all really want to raise our kids to be able to think on our own, not to think because I think this, I want you to think that. I want my kids to think it because that's the conclusion that they've come to. And again, I like how you said that as well, that you're taking in information. Because one of the things I always say, like, if you're searching, whatever your opinion is, whatever your perspective is, you can go on the internet and you can find all kinds of things to support that, right? You can find sites and opinions and all kinds of things to support whatever your perspective is, whether it's right or wrong, right? So there's so many different ways to find stuff that's right or wrong. And definitely in this world, we need to be arming our kids with a thought process, right? And that critical thinking, or even, as I say, like decision making, right? Am I right to say that, like, critical thinking is just a way to really teach them how to make right decisions?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit, yeah.
Yes. So I wanted to touch back on what you were talking about, the community when the kids are younger. And I think for me, I found that with the curriculum up to grade 2, it was actually quite good, because the kids were learning about the community, the police officers, the firefighters, the nurses, the garbage men, the people working in the stores. And they get a sense of that community, but then all of a sudden they hit grade 4 and the rug's pulled out from under them, and they stop talking about this community. They're still teaching historical facts, but the community that you spent all that time building in the curriculum is not touched on again. But when you're talking about who can you trust to tell you the truth, these are the people that have been with you from the very beginning. Like my friends are friends that I've had since elementary and high school. I mean, we had our 3rd reunion, I think, a couple of years ago for high school. So, I mean, they've been around a long time. Yeah. And even though I've moved around here and there, the core of my family is still there. So when you're talking about critical thinking, and you're going to be receiving a whole bunch of information, but when you sit down at night and you have a conversation with somebody, and you're exchanging information, you can figure out, okay, is this person's in my circle of trust? And even if they have a conflicting point of view, there's something in there that links you, that you can continue being friends, even though you might not agree on one thing. And I'd hate for you to blow up a friendship that you've had since you were 6 years old because of one issue that you couldn't see eye to eye on. And so there's a lot of things in social studies when you're talking about interactions that's more than just history. It's the life that you're hoping for yourself in the future, and who you the kinds of people you want to be surrounded with that are going to help you so that you can contribute something good and meaningful to the world. So
and isn't that our job as parents, to prepare our kids to go out and they have to function in society, right? So we should be teaching them these.
They can't come back to us and say, what should I do for this, and there was this situation, right? We want them, we want them to come back and visit, of course, but we want them to be able to make those decisions on our own. And even as adults, it's great to be able to have those conversations. I've got a 26-year-old as well. So even with him, it's nice to be able to have that conversation of what our perspectives are, and just, different things going on, whether it's going on in the world or just life personally and that kind of thing. Right. And that's that kind of relationship we want to, and I really do believe that being able to teach our kids in that way of really thinking on their own and being individual learners and really getting them to explore some of these different things to go along with learning, or just growing up, really not necessarily related to any kind of curriculum, but just growing up and learning things is what is definitely what we want to grow that as every year goes on. So finish us off with a little bit of a summary about what your course is. So you've got a number of modules there. So a number of different sort of courses that can be purchased, right? But so let us know a little bit just about, even just the titles or the quick summary of what you've really combined collectively on your site.
So the first module is the foundation for the critical thinking, and it's the how to think and the decision-making process. And it doesn't matter. You don't necessarily have to be Canadian to take that. Actually, the first three modules, although there's links to certain Canadianisms in there, it's very much open to anybody.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to build that foundation in the first few modules, and then come module 4 is when I start putting in all of the Canadiana. So in actuality, so we have module 4 was the beginning of the indigenous peoples, and then the Europeans coming here on first contact. And then in module 5, I do all of Eastern civilization. In module 6, I talk about Western civilization. And then module 7 and 8, I finish up and I teach the rest of Canadian history. So by the time you finish modules 1 to 8, you've actually learned everything that there is in the social studies curriculum that the government wants you to learn. The addition is I've got this concluding module about the worldview. And you take this module, it's free if you finish the first 8 modules. You take this module, and then when you go into high school, you have this framework that you could sift through all of the global stuff, because you're going to be learning a lot more global things. You're going to be learning about the economy. You're going to be learning about the Enlightenment and more of this philosophical stuff that might not be what you were taught growing up, and that's not what your family was believing. But at least you have this framework that you could sift through that, and you're not gonna falter, because those values that you had when you were a kid it's going to continue through. And so that's pretty much what it is. It's built. The modules build on each other because they're scaffolded.
Yeah.
I don't teach you a concept and then let it go. I'm going to keep coming back to it, so that when you end up doing the final, when you start mapping out your worldview, and that's what the worldview modules are about. When you start mapping out how you come to decisions and the sources of information you come to, then you can, I've lost my train of thought.
Well, you have that foundation, right?
Yeah.
You know where this comes from. You have those tools that you can use as, I remember discerning a reliable source. I know how to do that. I know the difference between primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. So I know what that looks like.
And you also see examples in history. People, events. But people were faced with similar types of obstacles and problems, and you could look at them and say, okay, I probably would have made that same decision. So how could I set myself up so that I don't end up in the same place as that person? So
and not just Canadians, but across the world, you'll see where when we show something that's the Canadianisms, you'll see how that relates to other cultures around the world, right? And the other thing is the roots of democracy. We talked about being a citizen in your community, whether that's your family or your school or your city or your country. Where did democracy come from? What is it all about? What does it mean to be a citizen in a democratic society? So there's that you can use and put that in your toolbox. I hate that term, but whatever. You can put that little tool in your tool belt that's like, okay, I understand what democracy is, and I understand what my role is in democracy, and I can take that and I can go, well, and this is what society is asking of me, and this is how I can contribute to your society. So it sounds like a lot for junior high students.
It is, and I peeled back a lot of stuff. I'm like, okay, I need what's gonna reach those kids, so they're gonna care about their future.
Yeah.
And
it really is.
It does amaze me that I was able to touch on everything that the government wants me to teach in terms of historical facts, and then take the social studies part, the critical thinking part, and say, okay, here you go. And guess what? We have something for you that you could build on. You could take it with you, and you could build on it in other social studies classes, and you can build on it, because decision making and processing information, that's a life skill. It doesn't stop within the school walls of the school. You take that and you apply it to things that happen to you.
Yeah. So when your kids ask you, why am I taking social studies? You have an answer for them. It's like, yes, you like, I'm not going to use this.
Yes,
and you can tell them, you can show them. And then I think the other really important thing is that we have it in a platform that kids can just go on and they can do it at their own pace. It's manageable. It's not. We started out with like almost 20 modules, and we went, well, hang on a second here. That's way too much. And we chiseled it down. We put it into a package that's we think is something that's going to engage the kids, because it's technology and kids are into technology, and it's totally it's a good pace. Really, you could go about 4 modules in the course of one school year. So it's the 8 modules goes over 2 school years. We think that's a manageable pace for parents and students alike.
And so it would be for like 11, 12, 13 year olds, maybe 12, 13, 14.
Not so much.
I'm thinking especially,
but I would say 11, 12, and 13.
Yeah,
that's that target age group. If you have we do have a couple of grade 5 students on it. So they started in when they were a mature 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Because the goal is to get your kid to do this program by themselves. So mom and dad don't need to sit beside them. They might need to for the first couple of the first lesson or two, when they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I move things around? Because it's supposed to be user friendly, but if your child is not, so tech savvy, they might not know that they could actually touch things on the screen and so after that, though, your child should be able to just run with this program and do it.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the maturity level of your 10 or 11-year-olds, and then they get to be like, my kids are like, Dad, go away. I got this. Like, oh, are you sure you don't want to? No, just go away.
And I'm hoping to, because I'm not. I mean, history can be dry, but
especially Canadian history.
But I'm not a kind of teacher who just sits there and spouts information. I want you to be invested in it.
Yeah.
So I do have a sense of humor. I try to infuse things that have influenced me. Like I talk about stuff from when I was. I shouldn't say talk about my stuff, but I talk about pop culture references from when I was younger, things that parents would talk about if they thought to think about it. I bring in music, I bring in art, I bring in television shows, movies and stuff, and I make these references so kids can see that, history can be pop culture, but it could also be like the highbrow culture.
And we hope that those kind of things spark conversations like, what is MASH? What is this? What is the Flintstones? What is this? And they talk to their parents like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
So we hope
that's good conversations with the kids.
Spark conversations with their parents and their families. Oh yeah, what'd you learn? Oh, I learned this. Really? Oh.
And we do get a lot of those comments. We get a lot of comments where the kid was laughing and as the parent came in. And I also got that comment too from other parents that my voice is very soothing.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely, definitely is. I think it works nicely. And I mean, the platform that you're using as well is really, again, I just found that, and I'm really familiar with a lot of different systems, using them myself in setting up courses and programs, as well as using a number of different ones myself. So definitely, it's a nice program you're using. So those two free lessons. You just go on the home page, right? I kind of forget how I got there, and I wasn't sure if we should have a special link for that, or you can see that just on the home
Right on
page.
the home page, there's a little button that says try 2 free lessons. It's the first 2 lessons in module 1. Module 1 is 12 lessons. A typical module is 10 lessons, but we added the 12. The first 2 lessons out of the 12 in module 1 is free. You just sign up and enroll, and you can go ahead and take those first two lessons.
So if you want to learn about just the history of the school system, the first 2 lessons cover that.
Yeah.
So if you just want to do that, those 2, that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about a little bit about your life as a homeschooler, but definitely how you've integrated that into a great program, because yeah, it sounds like you've really meshed nicely. Historical stuff that's good to know, and the reason we should, there's lots of different reasons we should know history, right? But it can be really dry, and just how you've integrated that in this course is going to be a real help to lots of homeschoolers. So it's I know you've already got lots of happy people there, and that have already working through and done your modules. But anybody watching this right now, just hopefully you've been able to see how approachable Lively and Stephen are. So if you go on their site, you want to know more about what they offer, they will definitely have a really warm way to let you know more about what that course is and how that might work into your homeschooling life, and just overall being able to teach our kids more about critical thinking, which I agree is so important. I'm actually thinking of I've got a 10 and 13-year-old, and I'm thinking the 2 of them together could do that, and then we can join together for conversations. So I'm thinking that could happen. It works both ways. So
also check out
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Check out our vblog too, because we have
you go on
a few little, you just click down, about us. Our vblog has just a few little kind of snippets from how we put the program together, a little bit about critical thinking, and there's a couple other in there that you might be interested in as well. It gives you a little bit more information about what the program's all about, and how to use the system. And so hopefully, if you have any questions, have a look at those. If not, just drop us an email from our form right from our site, and we'll be happy to talk to you.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching, whether you're watching live or watching this recording. I hope that we have given you lots to think about and encourage in your family. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.